centers on the moment where the son's understanding of love, choice, and freedom is violently overturned by his father's authority, setting the emotional foundation for the entire story. The scene opens in the father's lamplit study, a space that symbolizes power, tradition, and control, where the son is summoned not for discussion but for a verdict already decided. The father's command, "You'll marry her whether you like her or not," is delivered without anger or hesitation, which makes it more chilling. His calm certainty shows that resistance has never been considered an option. In that instant, the son realizes that his life is not truly his own. The hope he carried for a marriage built on affection or choice collapses under the weight of duty and obligation. This is not simply about a bride he has never met, but about the death of his belief that love can be freely chosen. The father represents a world where marriage is a transaction, a tool to secure alliances, settle debts, or preserve power, and the son is reduced to a piece on that board. Emotionally, the son cycles through disbelief, anger, and helplessness, yet none of these can find a voice, because his father's authority has been absolute for as long as he can remember. The study's oppressive stillness mirrors his internal paralysis, and when he finally turns to leave, it is not in rebellion but in defeat. His clenched fists and controlled silence reveal a man forced to swallow his own desires, knowing that open defiance would only bring harsher consequences. This moment kills his last hope, not in a dramatic outburst, but in a quiet, devastating realization that love, as he imagined it, has no place in the life his father has designed for him. Part 1. Therefore establishes the core conflict of the story, the clash between imposed duty and personal longing, and prepares the reader for a journey in which love must either be rediscovered in unexpected form or lost entirely, making the opening command. The emotional wound from which every future choice and transformation will grow deepens the emotional tension by introducing the bride, not as a villain or obstacle, but as a quiet mirror to the son's own loss of choice, complicating his anger and forcing the reader to reassess first impressions. Her arrival is deliberately subdued, no dramatic entrance, no attempt to charm or impress, because she has already learned that her value will be judged before she ever speaks. The whispers about her appearance and worth hover around her like a sentence already passed, reinforcing the theme that both bride and groom are trapped by expectations they did not create. From the son's perspective, she initially represents everything stolen from him: freedom, love, and hope. Yet, the narrative subtly shifts when he observes her posture, her restraint, and the guarded calm in her eyes. These details reveal that she is not unaware of her situation. She understands exactly what this marriage means, and has prepared herself to endure it with dignity, rather than protest. Unlike the son, whose anger burns inward, her suffering has taught her stillness as a form of survival. The crucial emotional turn in Part 2 lies in the realization that she does not look at him with entitlement, fear, or romantic expectation. She looks at him as one might look at an unavoidable fate. This parallel silently binds them before either is ready to acknowledge it. The son's resentment begins to fracture, not because he suddenly feels affection, but because he recognizes that she is as much a victim of the father's command as he is. The absence of dialogue heightens the tension, allowing glances, silences, and restrained movements to carry the weight of unspoken truths. Her lowered eyes are not submission but subtle protection, and her composure challenges the son's assumption that weakness defines her. By the end of Part 2, the story reframes the forced marriage from a one-sided punishment into a shared confinement, expanding the conflict beyond father versus son into a more complex emotional triangle. This section is vital because it plants the seed of empathy, the first fragile crack in the son's emotional armor, suggesting that love, if it ever comes, will grow not from desire or beauty, but from recognition, shared endurance, and the slow understanding that two people can be bound by circumstance, yet still choose who they become within it. Focuses on the wedding itself, transforming what should be a moment of celebration into a hollow ritual that underscores the emotional imprisonment of both bride and groom. The ceremony unfolds with practiced precision, vows spoken, hands joined, witnesses satisfied, yet every gesture feels performative rather than sacred, as if the couple is acting out roles assigned by tradition rather than stepping into a shared future. For the son, the wedding becomes the final confirmation that his life has been redirected without consent. The ring on his finger feels less like a promise and more like a seal on a contract He never signed willingly. He notices how the guests smile, oblivious or indifferent to the absence of joy. And this disconnect deepens his isolation, making him feel unseen even in a crowded room. The bride, meanwhile, maintains her calm composure, her face betraying no protest, which initially unsettles him. He expects fear or sadness, but instead encounters a controlled acceptance that hints at long-practiced endurance. When she finally meets his gaze during the vows, that brief, steady look becomes the emotional pivot of the scene, suggesting neither submission nor hope, but an unspoken agreement to survive what has been imposed on them. Speed. The wedding night continues this tone of quiet restraint, as they share the same roof but not intimacy, both acutely aware of the invisible boundary between obligation and consent. The silence that fills the space is not hostile but cautious, shaped by mutual uncertainty and unvoiced resentment. Is due for the son. This restraint is confusing. He had braced himself for confrontation or expectation, yet she offers neither, forcing him to confront his own assumptions about her and about marriage itself. Part 3 therefore serves to solidify the central theme that legality and ritual cannot manufacture love, and that union without choice breeds emotional distance rather than closeness. At the same time, it subtly prepares the ground for transformation by showing that neither character seeks to exploit the other's vulnerability. The absence of cruelty, even in such an unjust situation, becomes meaningful, implying that the possibility of love lies not in the ceremony that binds them, but in the choices they may yet make when no one else is watching. It marks the first quiet shift in the relationship, moving the story from imposed distance toward hesitant connection by revealing how intimacy can grow unintentionally through ordinary moments. Time begins to soften the sharp edges left by the wedding, not because the pain has vanished, but because routine forces proximity and observation. The son starts noticing the bride in ways he did not allow himself before, not as an obligation, but as a presence shaping his daily life. Her habits are modest and unassuming, rising before dawn, keeping the household running, asking for nothing that might burden him. These small acts, repeated without expectation of gratitude, unsettle him more than open demands would have. For what truly alters his perception is her kindness, offered quietly and without calculation, challenging his belief that she might resent him as deeply as he resents the marriage. The turning point arrives during a shared confinement, such as a long evening of rain that traps them indoors, stripping away distractions and leaving only conversation as a means of passing time. Their exchange begins cautiously, almost by accident, yet once it starts, it exposes the emotional histories they have both carried in silence. She speaks of loss and endurance, not to gain sympathy, but as simple truth. And her words reveal that her strength was forged through suffering rather than granted by circumstance. The son listens, and in listening, his anger begins to lose its focus. The enemy he imagined dissolves into a woman who has survived more than she ever deserved to bear. This moment does not ignite romance, but it dismantles the emotional wall between them, replacing resentment with understanding. He recognizes that her gentleness is not weakness, but a deliberate choice in a world that has offered her little mercy. Part 4 is crucial because it introduces empathy as the bridge between duty and affection, showing that love does not always begin with attraction or passion, but with the courage to see another person clearly. From this point forward, the marriage is no longer defined solely by the father's command, but by the fragile human connection forming in its shadow. Represents a decisive emotional turning point, where quiet understanding evolves into conscious choice, and the balance of power begins to shift away from the father's control. The son has grown accustomed to silence and endurance, but when his father intrudes, again issuing expectations about obedience, control, and appearances, the son is forced to confront the cost of continued submission. In this moment, the wife's response becomes pivotal, because instead of shrinking under authority, she steps forward with calm resolve. Her words are measured, respectful, yet unyielding, making it clear that she entered the marriage under compulsion but will not surrender her dignity within it. This act of defiance reframes her entirely in the son's eyes. She is no longer merely enduring circumstances but actively shaping her own boundaries. The father's authority, once absolute, falters in the face of her composure, revealing that power maintained through fear weakens when challenged by For the son, this moment ignites both admiration and guilt-admiration for her courage, and guilt for having assumed she would remain passive. He realizes that by staying silent, he has allowed the same control that crushed him to threaten her as well. 2. Her willingness to stand beside him rather than behind him creates a shared front that neither of them explicitly planned, yet both instinctively recognize as necessary. This is the first time the son feels loyalty not to duty, but to another human being, and it marks the beginning of emotional commitment. Sport 5, therefore transforms the marriage from a shared confinement into a partnership, however fragile, and signals the collapse of the father's psychological dominance. The son's internal shift is just as important as the external confrontation. He begins to understand that love may not always announce itself through tenderness, but through protection, solidarity, and the refusal to allow someone else to be diminished. This section propels the story forward by proving that resistance is possible, and that choosing one another, even in small, imperfect ways, can weaken the chains imposed by authority, setting the stage for love to grow from shared defiance and mutual respect. Explores the slow, intentional growth of trust as the marriage begins to transform from a defensive alliance into a genuine emotional bond built on choice rather than obligation. With the father's influence weakened, the son and his wife find space to learn one another without fear of immediate judgment or interference. Their interactions become more deliberate. Shared meals where silence is no longer heavy. Conversations that wander beyond necessity, and moments of laughter that surprise them both with their ease. These everyday exchanges are crucial because they replace the tension of survival with the comfort of familiarity, allowing affection to emerge naturally instead of being forced. The son begins to see how his wife's quiet nature masks a sharp awareness of the world around her, and he comes to admire her ability to offer kindness without losing herself. She, in turn, starts to recognize that his bitterness was never cruelty, but the residue of a life shaped by command and disappointment. As they open up, they exchange pieces of their inner lives' unfulfilled dreams. Fears of becoming hardened like his father, and her worry that she will always be viewed as less than. These confessions deepen their bond, turning vulnerability into a shared language. Physical closeness, once avoided, becomes gentle and consensual, reflecting trust rather than expectation. Part 6 emphasizes that love is not born from dramatic gestures, but from consistency and emotional safety, where two people choose each other repeatedly in small, meaningful ways. The son's perception of marriage shifts completely. What once felt like a prison begins to feel like a refuge. This stage is essential because it shows love as something learned and cultivated, not instantly recognized, reinforcing the story's central theme that even relationships born in coercion can be redeemed through mutual respect, patience, and the courage to be seen. Springs the central conflict to its breaking point by forcing the son to openly reject his father's authority and fully claim his own agency, not just for himself, but for the woman he now loves. The father returns with renewed demands, no longer subtle, insisting on obedience, heirs, and control. Believing that fear and tradition will still guarantee submission. This confrontation is different from the earlier ones because the son no longer stands alone or uncertain. He stands grounded in the life he has begun to build with his wife. When he finally speaks, his words are firm rather than angry, signaling maturity instead of rebellion. By declaring that he will choose his own path and protect his marriage on his own terms, he breaks the generational cycle of domination that once defined his future. His wife's presence beside him, her hand steady in his, reinforces that this decision is mutual, not possessive, and rooted in respect. Their father's shock exposes the fragility of his power, which depended entirely on silence and compliance. Emotionally, this moment frees the son from the identity imposed on him since childhood, replacing fear with resolve and duty with devotion. The conflict here is not about hatred, but about boundaries, demonstrating that love sometimes requires confrontation to survive. Part 7 is crucial because it proves that the son's transformation is complete. He is no longer reacting to his father's commands but actively shaping his own life. This act of defiance does not erase the past, but it prevents it from dictating the future, ensuring that the love he has discovered is protected, chosen, and strong enough to stand against the very force that once destroyed his hope. Serves as the emotional resolution of the story, revealing that love, once believed impossible, has quietly and irrevocably taken root through choice, patience, and mutual respect. With the father's control finally broken, the household settles into a peace that feels unfamiliar yet deeply grounding, allowing the son to reflect on how far he has come from the moment his hope was killed. Love does not arrive as a dramatic confession or sudden passion, but as a profound realization, often in an unguarded moment, watching his wife sleep, listening to her laugh without restraint, or noticing how her presence steadies him in ways nothing else ever did. He understands then that what began as obligation evolved into partnership because both of them chose to nurture what they were given instead of resenting it. For the wife, love means being seen and valued, not despite the circumstances, but within them. She no longer measures herself by whispers or expectations, but by the life she has built alongside someone who chooses her daily. Their bond is defined by equality, not sacrifice, and by commitment freely renewed rather than enforced. This final part reframes the story's opening command, proving that while authority can force a marriage, it cannot dictate the meaning that grows inside it. The son's last hope was not destroyed after all. It was reshaped, stripped of illusion, and reborn as something quieter, but far stronger than the love he once imagined. Part 8 closes the narrative with a sense of earned peace, emphasizing that true love is not always found where one expects it, but where two people decide to protect one another and build a future on their own terms.